This special edition of the Epic Geeks show is brought to you by spoilers. There are going to be many spoilers in this show about TellTale Games like The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us, so if you do not like spoilers, do not continue watching because there are spoilers.
Don't forget to tell them about the spoilers.
Right, there's spoilers.
Yes.
Welcome everybody, my name's Tarley and with me is Zul, and today we are talking about one of our favorite game studios. Lately became one of my favorites, and that is TellTale Games. If you haven't heard of them, they make the Walking Dead episodic series as well as The Wolf Among Us. Great series there, in my opinion.
Yes.
So,
very good.
So just a little brief introduction. If you weren't aware, The Walking Dead is kind of popular right now. Started off as a comic book by Robert Kirkman and two other people that their names are not really memorable because no one ever talks about them. Do you know their names?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Robert Kirkman's the one doing all the TV appearances. But, which then got changed into a TV show. Not changed, but made into a TV show, which is now running alongside the comic
The
book
artist
series.
was Tony Moore.
Tony Moore.
Was the artist. I know I should know that because I like his stuff.
And then, TellTale adapted it into their own video game series, which started off as seasons. It's kind of the first game that we've ever seen do this episodic thing. Not really the first, but the first one to get popular. Doing it in seasons and episodes, kind of like a TV show.
Yeah, because TellTale had done a couple other things of their own, kind of like, well, not their own, but they'd done other, Sam and Max, stuff like that, but this was the one that really sort of launched them into winning awards and everything.
And that, we would have to assume, is because of the popularity of The Walking Dead beforehand.
Yes, and it's also when they kind of changed how they approached their games and made it really more focused on the decisions that actually affect where it's going and stuff. They kind of changed how they were making their games with The Walking Dead, too.
Mm-hmm. And then about a few months after the first season ended and they were really talking about moving forward with season 2, we got a whole new game called The Wolf Among Us, based on a popular comic series called Fables. This one follows the character Bigby Wolf in the fantasy world where all characters from all sorts of fairy tales are living in New York City amongst the real living people.
Yeah, when I describe it to people, they're like, "Oh, like Once Upon a Time."
Yes,
I'm like, "Well,
I've had that comparison as well.
Really horribly violent and dark."
Yeah, this one has definitely a dark approach.
And it was around before Once Upon a Time, the comics. So Once Upon a Time stole from it.
Yes, Fables is much older than that, and we'll go more into details on Fables. But first, we're going to talk about more in detail about the Walking Dead game. Actually, no. Before that, we're going to talk about the history of TellTale completely. TellTale is based in San Rafael, California. I don't know California city names.
San Rafael.
San Rafael. That is Zul's area of expertise, being in California. But most game studios are located in California these days, but they were most of the studio's designers were formerly employed by LucasArts, which no longer exists. They were really, TellTale was really based on making episodic gaming. Like, before they even made The Walking Dead, like you said, Jake, this was kind of their premise. And like you said, Sam and Max freelance police around 1993. That's when they were like really starting to push out their games in the early 90s. A lot of people didn't know that TellTale came from that time.
Yeah, and they also did some updates for Monkey Island, which is, a really popular franchise from LucasArts back in the day, and TellTale was able to update and go with that, and Monkey Island games are awesome. They even did a Homestar Runner game. Mm-hmm. For those of you that remember Homestar Runner.
They made a Texas Hold'em game. I mean, that kind of... It's not really in their line of what they're known for, but still, they made a Texas Hold'em game, as well as CSI. They made a couple CSI games as well.
Yep. They have some of their own stuff, too. Hector Badge of Carnage was their own little detective type thing. But Texas Hold'em isn't actually as far from them as you'd think, because they did the poker Night at the Inventory game, And then what was the second? Poker Night 2, and those are hilarious if you haven't played those.
I have not.
They're poker card games with popular characters from video games, like the Heavy from Team Fortress 2,
Hmm.
or Ash from the Evil Dead series.
Hmm.
Claptrap from Borderlands. It has all these characters as like your
Oh.
dealers, people you're playing cards against. You know, they have the actual voice actors for these characters, and they're hilarious. I'm not big on card games, so they actually kind of bore me, but I have Poker Night 2, and it's really fun and really funny.
So they had all these small projects like this that they worked on through the late 90s, and they even worked with Valve a little bit on Team Fortress 2, some of their designers in the 2000s. But around 2010, they actually made a contract with NBC Universal to make two episodic game series about Back to the Future and Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Now, we have not seen any of these games come to light. Do you think we will?
No, they made them.
Did they?
Yes, they made Back to the Future and Jurassic Park, and they were in episodes like The Walking Dead. Jurassic Park did not have the greatest reviews. They said it was too many just QuickTime events and not much. Back to the Future had pretty decent reviews, and it's the one that started getting them attention, which I think is what allowed them to get the deal with the other stuff, The Walking Dead and everything. Let's see,
never
Back
seen
to
this
the
game
Future.
before. But
Back to the Future was 2010 to
Yeah.
2011 is when it was coming out, and Jurassic Park was in 2011.
I never heard of those games at the time, only until we were doing this research for the show. So,
Yeah, I knew about them, and I kind of always planned on getting them and never did.
well, that being said, they obviously caught. Maybe the games weren't that great, but they caught someone's attention over at Warner Bros. Interactive, and they had been talking about doing a game for The Walking Dead for a while. But they weren't quite sure how they wanted to approach it. And when they see this episodic game style that could be kind of like a TV show, they think, wow, this is a great idea. And this led us into what we now know as The Walking Dead. Season 1, starring Lee, what was his last name, Everett?
Yes.
Lee Everett and Clementine, still don't know her last name.
Yeah, just Clementine.
Just Clementine. And we also have Kenny and Duck and whatever her name is, his wife.
And you had the brief appearance of one of the comic book characters.
Yes, we did get to see Herschel.
Yeah, well, Herschel, and then there was also, what's his name? He's one of the most popular ones in the TV series right now.
Glenn as well
Glenn,
was on Herschel's
yes,
farm.
Glenn.
Yep.
Yeah, Glenn was in the first episode or two.
But this was groundbreaking. It got TellTale got over 80 Game of the Year awards for The Walking Dead. And
Yeah.
that was
It was emotional. Oh man.
never before had I played a game that really. I mean, I'd played like games like Mass Effect or other RPGs that made you make decisions, but The Walking Dead, maybe it was just because it was in the Walking Dead universe, or maybe it was because it was episodic, but each episode, at the end of each episode, you'd be making this decision, and then it would end, and it was something I hadn't experienced in gaming before. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to wait a couple more months for the next episode.
And I like you said, I'd played games that got me attached and made me really feel things like Mass Effect series, but these ones were just above and beyond that. Oh my gosh, I was really excited that they were making the Walking Dead game. I had read some of the comics, and I don't think I've even read any further in the comics than I was at that point.
Yeah.
But I was really excited. I love zombie stuff, and I was like, this looks really cool. And it came out, and I got it, and I played that first episode, and it just kind of blew my mind. I think it was actually the first time I ever wrote a review on Steam, because it hit me so hard.
Well,
I put down this series is off to a great start. Feels tons more like surviving a zombie apocalypse than any other zombie game I've ever played. And it's true. It really feels like you're surviving. It feels like you're barely scraping by.
And at the time, I was still a huge fan of the comics right when this game came out, and a huge fan of the show. And so that alone just wrapped me into wanting to play this game. And then the fact that Robert Kirkman was definitely on board with the making of this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really helped influence because it really, even though it's far from what's happening in the show and the comic books, it still captured that same feeling that the show manages to create every episode. Like the feeling of desperation, the feeling of we have to stick together with a group of people, but you can't trust everybody that you're with. It does a
Yeah.
great job of putting that. And
You're trying to figure out who to trust and who to help and who to
yeah,
not help. And like the very beginning of, I think it's episode 2, when you
yeah.
have food, but you don't have enough for everybody, you have to choose who you give the food to.
Oh yeah.
And then like
That
people
small
get pissed
decision.
at you. And
You know you have to give the food to the kids. You
uh,
at least have to give food to the kids.
I don't think I gave the food to Duck, and I think Kenny got all pissed at me.
Um, but when that the end of season 1 when that came, man, that
Uh,
was very emotional. The character that you had been playing as the entire series, I did not see this coming, but he gets bitten at the end of the 4th episode, and so the 5th and final episode of the season, you know you're playing as this guy who's infected.
yeah,
You're,
you know you're playing as a dead man.
and you like right away you have like the option like do you tell people or do you keep it a secret?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then like people will abandon you or go with you on sort of your final mission to go get Clementine back. And I guess it's possible to have every single person go with you if they're still alive.
I managed that.
I I had most of them. I had more alive than not alive, but then not everybody went with me. Like I had like 5 or so people, and like 3 of them went with me, and 2 of them were like, "Forget it." I think Kenny was one of the ones that was like, "Forget it." Jerk.
Yeah, like you shot my son even though I asked you to.
I know, right?
But yeah, once that one ended with Lee getting shot by Clementine,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was.
So you had Clementine shoot him.
Yes, I did.
So did I. So did I. Because you can choose like where she doesn't, I think, and just kind of leaves him chained up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had Clementine shoot him, and then she just walks off in the field, and I was just sitting there staring at my computer, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to move.
And it was the
I
end
don't
of
want
the
to do
season,
anything.
so
I wanted to just curl up and cry for a while. I think.
yeah, I mean, but that was. We knew Telltale right then. I knew that this was a great studio. This was awesome.
Oh yes, they cemented themselves in my watch everything they make and
Yep.
get it the second it comes out.
So as we're patiently awaiting, the release of more information of The Walking Dead, are they going to do a season 2? They start talking about this thing called The Wolf Among Us. And at the time, I had never looked into Fables before. It was a comic book
Neither
that
had I.
was completely unfamiliar with.
Yep.
But that game finally came out around, what was that, like October or November of
Let me
last
see.
year?
It came out in October. So before that, they did have the little single standalone DLC episode for The
Oh,
Walking
right.
Dead.
Yeah, completely forgot about
400 days.
Yeah, that was basically taking place 400 days into the apocalypse, and the first episode of The Walking Dead was the first day of the apocalypse, pretty much, kind of like the show and the comic book.
Uh-huh.
So now this has progressed, over a year into the apocalypse, and that episode you played as what, 4 different or 5 different people.
5, and you could choose which order you did it in, and that would actually kind of affect the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then those characters
Never
kind
showed
of
up in the next season.
they were supposed to.
Right, but they never did. Which confused me. It made me wonder what the DLC had to do with anything. There were no characters from the first season. It was just 5 people in the apocalypse. A couple
Yeah.
of them were like right when it started. A couple of them
Well,
were.
no, I think in season 2 of The Walking Dead, the redheaded girl that kind of betrays you
Oh
to
yes.
the crazy guy, and then she rejoins you again, or at least she can. She did in mine. She was in the DLC episodes, I think.
Was she?
I think she was in one. I think some of them did show up, but I didn't remember the characters very well. So
Yeah.
from the
I might
DLC,
have to go back and replay that now. I do
Yeah, I'm
plan on just
I'm-
playing through the whole first and second season again
same here. I'm planning on doing all of season 1, the DLC, then all of season 2.
in one day.
Yes. Oh god, I'd be an emotional wreck. Like, give me chocolate. I need something.
But yeah, so once they announced this The Wolf Among Us game, I was definitely curious. It looked like a totally new style.
Oh yeah, I loved the look of it immediately.
It
That
it was
the very
very,
80s neon,
yeah, very purpley neon,
really cool.
very awesome. Um, and it just felt different, yet at the same time it felt better. Because
Hmm.
one of the things that plagued The Walking Dead season one was it was it didn't run very well. Now, my first experience with it was on Xbox 360, and then I bought season one on Steam. But at least on console, it was very bad. Walking Dead was very laggy.
I'd heard all that, but I only played it on PC, and it always seemed to work fine. There were little things here and there, but nothing major.
But so, like, I hadn't played through the first season of The Walking Dead on PC when I got The Wolf Among Us on PC, and I was just
Okay.
so very impressed with how well it was performing. You know, there was no lag during the event, the QuickTime events.
Hmm.
But man, this
Which
one,
would have been bad if there was, because
yeah.
they're important.
But that's what really shook things up with this one was the combat in this game felt really dynamic. Like it was mentioned before by someone at IGN that you're kind of orchestrating a fight scene
Yeah.
when you're in
Yes.
fight scenes, and it was definitely awesome, which you didn't really see in The Walking Dead season one.
Yeah, that was more shake the zombie off, shoot it in the head.
Hmm. Yeah, this time around you're chasing someone through tight hallways,
Ugh.
jumping out of windows, falling on top of
Ripping people's
cars,
arms off and
ripping
then
people's
beating them with
arms
them.
off. But let's try and get a little backstory here about what we know from Fables. It's a comic by Vertigo, and like we said, it's about the fairy tale fable characters living among people.
Yes, their land, the land they all came from, or the lands they come from, are kind of loosely connected to each other.
Hmm.
It's possible to travel from one fairy tale land to another, and I've read a bunch of the comics since then, but like you, I hadn't heard from it until The Wolf Among Us came out.
Hmm.
Um, and so like the lands are even divided up kind of by country. It's like, oh, let's go to where all the Arabian fairy tales are. Stuff like that
Yeah.
happens. But they have to get out of their land because the adversary has uh, basically gone to war with them and driven them all out of the fairy tale lands, and they've escaped to our world.
Hmm. And now The Wolf Among Us takes place, 20 years or so, maybe 10 years. It's a big gap anyway between when Fable the comics start.
Yeah,
Um,
it's before the comics, and it doesn't contradict anything in the comics straight up, but some things feel kind of off because if you read the comics, it feels like the characters are still getting to know each other, but you're
mhm.
like, but you did all this in the game
Right, they
together,
know
like
all each other in
you,
the game, yeah.
yeah. So, but otherwise, yeah, it doesn't straight up contradict anything.
But like,
Any characters that you're able to kill or anything in the game don't show up in the
yeah.
comics. So,
And one thing I love about the universe is like their names and stuff. So you play as a
yes,
Big B Wolf.
big bad wolf.
Yes.
I love it. I love
And
Bigby is awesome.
yeah, he's an awesome character. He's very, you can tell he's just kind of worn down. He lives in a very raggedy apartment with one of the pigs that I assume he
Colin.
blew down his house. The pig's name is
Yes.
Colin, if you never knew
Yep.
that.
He's one of the three little pigs.
He's not very little anymore.
Yes.
But he lives with Colin in this just raggedy, beat down apartment in New York City, and you can tell that all of the Fable characters they're kind of in the slums of New York, but it's kind of the only place that they can really exist without anybody noticing them.
Yeah, and you find out there's going to be spoilers for the comics too.
Yeah.
FYI, you find out in the comics that that little section, they're actually they set that section up before the United States became a thing. It's actually their own almost sovereign area.
Hmm.
Like they're separate from New York or surrounding them.
Yeah.
They're completely separate. They have their own laws, and the mayor of New York knows that it's a little separate thing, but just thinks it's this community that's been around for a while, you know, sort of like a religious type thing.
Right, and you wonder, well, how do all these fairy tale characters live without being noticed? Well, they use what's called glamour, and
Hmm.
it makes them look like people. Now, there's a lot of problems because people can't afford glamour. Glamour is very expensive, made by witches, and witches need their money. So there's a lot of conflict within the game and the comic books of people not taking their glamour, and they have to get sent to the farm
Which is actually a farm. It's not a euphemism for killing them.
No, they just go to a
It's
fairy tale.
actually a farm where all the ones that it's too hard to disguise or don't want to be disguised live.
But man, this was one of the now if you just still don't know what the main theme of the story is, it's a murder mystery. So your Big B is like the sheriff of this area. The big bad wolf is the sheriff, and you and Snow White. This just sounds ridiculous when I explain it to other people, but I know people listening to this are already
It's amazing. So good.
So the big bad wolf and Snow White are trying to hunt down murderers, and it's such probably one of the best murder mysteries I've ever watched.
I love
Played.
and I love noir style stuff, and that's exactly what this is. This is, but it's also 80s and neon and vibrant.
Yes, and it has
with like techno synth pop music, which is some of my favorite music in a game ever.
Yep. And it really has the tendency to give you the good cop, bad cop moments, and you can choose between calmly having a discussion with someone to literally ripping their arm off.
And beating them with it.
Which I chose that option, and I assume you did as well.
Yes, I did my first playthrough. I've had 2 playthroughs of The Wolf Among Us so far. And the first playthrough, I kind of went with how I felt. Like, kind of, if I was in this situation, if I was Big B, what would I be doing? And I'd be losing my temper sometimes and ripping people's arms off. But other times, but overall, trying to do the right thing. Like, I wasn't just violent to be violent, you know? It was kind of like, oh, this guy's really ticked me off. He deserves it.
And it does such a good job of, like, making you feel like, well, I could, if I beat this guy up, I know I can get an answer from him. I know I can, but it just feels wrong.
Yeah. My second playthrough, I did the, like, good cop all the way. You know, like, I would stop fighting the second they were subdued. You know, I wouldn't go farther. I always trying to make sure I was helping all of the fables, but kind of sticking by the laws. Like with Colin, throughout the series, you know, you're kind of like telling him you're going to have to go to the farm if you don't get a glamour, da-da-da-da-da. When I did my first playthrough, where I was trying to help people, but I was losing my temper and stuff, I ended up letting Colin stay. I was like, you're my friend, I'm not going to send you off. But I sent Toad off, and Toad got all pissed. He's like, why isn't Colin here? And I was like, well, he's being taken care of. And Toad's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. But when I did my good cop playthrough, I was like, I'm sorry, Colin, I've warned you a bunch of times, you've got to go to the farm. And I sent both of them to the farm, and Toad was like, well, he was still ticked, but he didn't have that over me. He was like, well, whatever, we're both getting sent.
Yeah, and here's a nice picture of Colin for you guys on the video to see. He's a very ugly-looking pig. But again, I just loved how they told this story. Such a great murder mystery, and again, the ending of it really just... you finally turn into the ultimate wolf.
Oh, when you go full wolf.
And you just eat everybody in this room that's attacked. Well, it's really just one person who duplicates themselves, Bloody Mary.
Yep. Bloody Mary's creepy.
She is. I didn't know she had that ability to do that, but... yeah, she does that, and you end up solving the murder mystery, which, well, kind of. Because it ends, of course, Season 1 ends on a very strange cliffhanger, which I do not understand what was actually happening in the end at all.
I've read so many different theories. I'm like, that makes sense. And then I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't. But wait, it does. I don't even know what's happening anymore.
Really, we just like we think the murder mystery is solved. Everyone's good to go. But at the end, we see who was that? The stripper girl.
It's the one you see at the very end.
What's her name?
It's not. It wasn't Nessa, was it? Little Mermaid.
Maybe. That's who that was. I never put that together.
Yeah. Nessa was the Little Mermaid.
Anyway, it was one of the strippers who were working for Georgie Porgy at the Puddin' and Pie.
Yep.
And we see her walking away, and there's just this look on Bigby's face, and it's like he's figuring something out, but we don't know.
But I'm like, wait, what are you figuring out? Because like she says something to you that the original girl that gets killed says to you, word for word, the same line. And so one of the theories is that is still the same girl, and she never actually died. It was someone else's head,
Just wearing
but
glamour.
she glamored it to look like her, and actually left it for Bigby to find because it was the only way to get his attention, to search into what was going on with the Crooked Man and all this horrible things. So there's lots of theories about that. There's some really good theories. I haven't found one that I think fully fits it yet. There's just little things I'm like, well, that theory makes sense, except for this. Doesn't match up type of thing, you know?
Yeah.
But I I think The Wolf Among Us is my favorite. I think I like it more than their Walking Dead games. I just fell in love with the world, the style, the music, everything, and it actually can feel like you're making a good choice and a right choice. In The Walking Dead, it never feels like that.
I would disagree with you there just because maybe it's just because I love the Walking Dead universe. I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
But the Walking Dead's choices, I mean, it wasn't necessarily good or bad. It was just like how desperate are you? Were the
Yeah.
choices it felt like in the Walking Dead.
See, The Wolf Among Us, I felt like I could actually win.
Yeah, that's true. And in a zombie apocalypse, you're
Walking
just
Dead,
how
no.
can you not lose longer?
Especially, my ending to season 2 I got was just so awful
Well,
and
and that's what we'll go
sad.
into now because
Yes.
another thing that I loved was that we were about just one episode into The Wolf Among Us or two when season 2 of The Walking Dead started.
I think season 2 of The Wolf Among Us came out around the same time as episode 1 of
Yeah.
season 2. Like, they were around the same time.
Which was fantastic because then about every month or every month and a half we were having a new episode of the
Get one
other
or
game
the
and
other.
it'd switch
Yeah.
off and that was great. It just constant content from this developer.
Yep.
So then season 2 of The Walking Dead comes and it's again way better than the first season, steady, and it integrated a lot more of the fast-paced combat in the QuickTime events that the Wolf
Yeah.
Among Us had.
Yep.
But this one, a big turn, you're playing as Clementine.
Oh,
Now,
did you on Twitter all of the hashtag #MyClementine?
yes.
All the stuff, and well, like when the first one with the first season, it was kind of people saying what they would do for Clementine.
Yeah.
You know, as
Yeah.
Lee, what they would do to keep her around and everything. And in this one, it was My Clementine. People felt really attached to
Yeah.
her.
And yeah, they did a great job of you really, even though I'm not like a 7-year-old girl, I really felt like I was playing as the 7-year-old girl or however old she
Oh,
is.
and the first episode
Right.
just starts off to me bawling my eyes out
Yeah.
with the dog.
Yeah, there were so many emotional moments just within the first half an hour of the first episode there,
That
season
dog.
2.
The second the dog shows up, I was like, ah, crap.
Or right away you lose the two people you've been traveling with for 400 days at this point.
Immediately.
You-
I connect more to animals, so
Right, and then
people
you
I'm
have
like,
to
ah,
kill a
crap, that
dog.
sucks. Yeah,
And so
I
throughout,
like stopped playing. I like paused it and just cried for a while.
Yeah.
I was a wreck.
So now that you're deep into the apocalypse, that's when you really got to see all these people for how they really are. They're brutal. They're do whatever it takes to survive. You start to get that feeling that kind of is also existing currently in the show and the comics.
Even the good people aren't
Yep.
really good.
And you start meeting all these new people. So many new characters come and go within season 2.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of control this time of who comes and who goes and
Yes.
how they go specifically.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, it felt like season 2 was filled with, up until at least the last episode, season 2 didn't have that many changes that would end differently. Because you could make different choices, but you'd still get the same option. Like with the dog, for example. You could either feed it or not, but either way you had to shoot it because it would bite you no matter what.
Well, either way it would die because it gets impaled when you push it.
Yeah,
So you can shoot it and put it out of its misery, or leave it to suffer and die there.
yeah. But
So yeah, whether you feed it or not, whether you shoot it or not, you get attacked and it dies.
And so there were a few instances like that throughout the season that were like you'd think, oh my god, I just made a decision and now a character's dead. But actually, in reality, that person died no matter what. They would die at a later point, like a little girl. What's his name's daughter? The crazy girl?
Was it Sarah?
Sarah,
Was it? No.
yeah.
Was it Sarah?
Yep, Sarah would either die because you didn't help her out of a window, or
Yeah,
she
I
would
abandoned
die.
her.
Apparently, she would die later on from falling off a porch that collapsed or something.
Yeah, I left her.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was like, you know what? I feel horrible for doing this, but she's gonna die.
Hmm.
This type of person is not gonna get over it. They're not gonna step up to the plate. They're gonna die. They're gonna be a hindrance.
But
And I left her.
but again, this season did such a good job with decisions like that. You're just like, well,
I felt
I
horrible
feel like a
doing it.
bad person, but if this was real, this is probably what I would end up doing.
Hmm.
And they did a great job of making those moments feel like that. And then you get like Kenny, a character from the first season, finally
Oh,
rejoins you.
when he showed up at the ski lodge,
Yeah.
I was like, Kenny.
And that's how I wanted to feel for the longest time, but deep down you could see that he had kind of lost it
Messed
because
up.
his
Yes.
wife was dead, had shot herself, and his son was dead. And then he has a new girl that he likes, and then she dies. Like
Yeah.
Kenny's just going through a lot. And so
Hmm.
when it brings us finally to the end of season 2, we suddenly realize that there are so many choices thrown at you at episode 5, and it's
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I need to go through and replay season 2 especially because
yeah.
yeah, I don't. Oh, so how did you have anyone with you with your ending?
My ending, I had this one girl, I can't remember her name. She has like short hair. She's a
Jane.
badass. Jane.
Jane.
Jane and Kenny are fighting each other, and I'm just thinking,
Uh-huh.
oh no, the two characters I have cared about the most in this entire season,
Yep.
they're the only people left with me. It's a snowstorm, we can barely see. They're fighting each other. And we had a baby before us, but it appears that the baby is gone. And so Kenny freaks out. He thinks that Jane killed the baby, and he starts trying to kill her.
Hmm.
Now, in this moment of desperation, I can't let Kenny kill Jane, so I shoot Kenny in the head. And then to find out that Jane actually only hid the baby. She did not kill the baby. And in my anger, I tell Jane, no, I am leaving you as well. I'm taking the baby. So me, Clementine, at the end of my season, am walking through a field of walkers covered in guts with a baby in my hand, alone.
Yep.
And that's how the
That's
season ends.
that's the same one I got. That's the same decisions I made at the end there as you. Yeah, they're fighting, and I keep pushing them both off each other. Like
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
favoring one or the other. I'm like, Kenny, stop. Jane, stop. Get in between them.
Yeah, and I tried that as hard as I could to not favor
A couple times I even waited too long because some of the decisions are really quick. You
them.
have to
Yeah.
make, and
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know who to stop, and then they would just keep going, like stabbed each other, and then finally, like you, I shot Kenny, and as I did it, I was like yelling at my computer, "Why did you make me do this, Kenny?
Yes.
You
Yes.
jerk! Why did you make me kill you? This is
I
horrible!"
didn't want to do this, but he would
And then
have
same
killed Jane.
thing,
There's
and
no-
then
he would have killed
Jane,
her.
and then same thing with Jane. Like, I kind of thought that was what was going on. Like, the whole time I was like, "There's no way the baby's actually gone." I'm pretty sure Jane probably hid it because she was saying the way she was talking. She was like, "Just trust me. Just stay out of whatever happens. Don't get involved." She knew that's what was going to happen.
But in my logical decision was I can't trust this person now. If she's
Yep.
willing to do this to Kenny, she could do it to me.
Yep, exactly. That was saying. I was like, "No, just leave. I can't believe you did that. You just made me shoot Kenny."
But from what I understand, there's options where you end with Kenny alive. There's options where you end with Jane alive. There's
Jane.
option where they're both alive.
And
Um,
I feel like there was even another character you could have there. If
I don't remember
um,
who it is, but there's also another character there. Which, this is very interesting because now season 3, whenever that comes along, there's going to be so many different starting options, which hasn't happened yet in The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Having multiple starts. Which means season 3 is going to be very, very different for people playing.
the only things I can find showing the endings are like videos, and I just want to know what the character choices are.
Yeah.
I just, I just want to see who the characters that can be alive are. But yeah, so yeah, you can have one or the other, or both. That's why I want to go through and replay it.
I kind of would like to have them both alive to see that, but at the same time, I kind of look at it like I made those decisions, and I kind of just want to live with them when I play season 3,
Yeah,
because I've played both The Wolf Among Us and The Walking Dead as if they were choices I'd be making, and so I feel like if I went back and played it again, I'd have a hard time making any different options, just
Yeah,
because it's
same
the same
here.
choice that I made.
yeah. Like, that's why the only way I was able to do The Wolf Among Us a second playthrough is because I set a parameter. I said I'm gonna be the good cop and try to help people and follow the rules. And so I wasn't trying to make the decisions.
Yeah.
I was just saying which one of these fits that.
See, now I tried that when I tried to play Mass Effect. Like I tried to replay it. I'm like, I'm just gonna be evil. I'm gonna be the worst captain ever. And then I'd get to a major decision and be like, I can't do it.
See that with Mass Effect, I was able to do that. I have my Paragon playthroughs, I have my Renegade playthroughs. I'm just like, oh, this is the bad choice. Just make that one.
All right. So moving on, let's talk about the future. Telltale, on one night of terrible video game awards, Telltale shined when they announced 2 new game series that they were making in one night, both of which surprised a lot of people. Especially the first one I'm going to talk about, and that one is Tales from the Borderlands.
Oh, I was so excited.
I'm going to go ahead and just play the initial minute and 30-second trailer here, so take a look.
Product not yet rated.
Welcome to Marcus Munich. I know what you're trying to do, but you are not Vault Hunters. You are only going to get yourselves killed. Or worse. Trust me, you want no part of this insanity.
Listen, kiddos, trust Handsome Jack. You want every part of this insanity. Oh, God. So many people are gonna die.
So many people are going to die indeed. From Handsome Jack himself, even though he's dead, who knows what's going on here. But I don't know, this was a very surprising announcement to hear from Telltale, to say the least, but at the same time, it is so perfect. It is such a good idea for them to make this game.
Like when you think about Borderlands and you think about the company behind, like what type of company would make that type of game, you can totally see them going, "Hey, do you want to like make a game with us? That'd be sweet, dude."
Yeah,
like they're totally the type of company that would do that. And I love the Borderlands games. They are hilarious. They are fun. I'm super excited for the pre-sequel, and this came out completely out of left field. Like you just didn't expect it at all, but instantly on board.
Yeah,
instantly
they
on
already
board.
have the same art style, so
Exactly,
right
yeah.
away. Great.
And and it's going to be a completely different feel. Like I'm like, oh, this is going to be a Telltale game. I can sit down and there's going to be important decisions and there's going to be emotional stuff, but I'm not going to be a wreck afterwards. Probably, maybe.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a more comedic feel, I assume, because that's how Borderlands is. It's very laid back and comedic. At the same time, with serious tones to it, it's overall pretty funny. With Handsome Jack and Butt Stallion is a great example.
Yes.
But they've already talked about how there's going to be like a wallet and loot collections available for this game. Not quite sure how it's going to work out because it's still going to be in the style of The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us. But
I read a little bit about it, and they said kind of what it is it'll just kind of affect the visuals of the QuickTime events, because the combat is still completely the QuickTime events like they do. But depending on what loot, what type of stuff you've gotten, what weapons you have, it'll change like what you're using in those. So sounds like it'll mainly be a visual thing. Like there was a bunch of hands-on stuff over the past week or so, at various cons and everything.
Yep. What's PAX is the big one going on
PAX.
this past weekend.
Yep, PAX. There was some hands-on stuff, and I read, and they said like towards the beginning, the little bit they were able to play.
Yeah.
Like you get in a sticky situation, and you actually get a loader. One of the big robots drop down, and as it's dropping, you get to make some decisions about what type of armaments it has. And then so when it lands, it has different weapons depending on what you choose, and those are what you have to use in the QuickTime events.
Yeah, and it's still like the menus and stuff. Like I've seen pictures of like what your HUD looks like, and when you're selecting weapons, it looks just like Borderlands. Like you get all
Yep.
the stats for your weapons and stuff like that. So they're really keeping to the theme of Borderlands, and that's what I love about Telltale is they will stick to how it is, even though they're sticking with their style of game. It's still gonna feel like Borderlands at the same time. Which is awesome. And that even makes me even more excited for what they're doing for their next game that they announced, which we've heard very, very little about this one. And I assume just because it's not as far along as Borderlands, but I was always hoping this would happen from the beginning of hearing of Telltale, and they finally announced it. So here is the trailer for Telltale's Game of Thrones.
Product not yet rated.
I pretty much had a heart attack the first time I saw that trailer, since I am a huge Game of Thrones fan.
Yes.
And if this was on Twitch right now, our video would be muted because of the horrible content ID system.
Yeah, oh.
But-
And Game of Thrones perfectly fits in. It's very similar to The Walking Dead. I mean, Robert Kirkman and George R. R. Martin are actually compared a lot as writers because they're both known for killing characters off all the time.
Yeah.
And since that happened in Telltale's Walking Dead, that's going to happen a lot in this. There's going to be lots of characters that you can have alive or dead, depending on your choices.
And it's a perfect universe because the Westeros is such a huge, expansive universe that the show and the books only cover like, a certain perspective, multiple perspectives, but not all of it. So a game series like what Telltale can do is perfect because it can fit alongside it, but it can be totally new characters.
Which is something we didn't mention about The Walking Dead, is it doesn't directly change or have to do with anything from the comics, which The Walking Dead is based more on the comics than not the TV series.
Right.
And you briefly run into a couple characters, but for the most part, it's completely own thing, completely separate,
And for the most
and they
part,
can
the
do the
game-
same thing with Game of Thrones.
The game, the show, and the comics for The Walking Dead, they all theoretically exist together. Like, Kenny and Daryl could potentially meet each other, but they never will, but it's possible.
Yeah.
So same here with Game of Thrones. It exists at the same time as you're watching the TV show, but who knows what we're going to be seeing. Now, Telltale has finally put out this tiny little detail of what the game could possibly be about. And it's all we've seen so far, but this little picture here with the quote, "Trackers and hunters sworn to deep wood with clan names like Forrester and Woods, Branch and Bull." What does that mean? And hashtag Iron from Ice.
Which is, the people are thinking that might be what the title is going to be, is Iron from Ice. Or like the first episode or something.
Interesting.
They think that might be the title of the first, because like all the episodes have their little titles.
Yeah, some people are theorizing that the iron is having to deal with the Iron Islands and the Greyjoys, so we could have something to do with them going to the north. That is a theory I've heard. The Greyjoys going.
Yeah,
north.
well, like the Deep Wood and the families, Forrester Woods, Branch, Bull. So those are family names. They're in the northern part, if I remember right.
So we could be seeing a lot of the north. Maybe the Wall. Maybe.
Oh, please! That's where personally, I'd like to be in the north and doing with everything up there.
I'd like to go. Personally, I'd like to have it be like the show where we're going all over the Westeros and following multiple characters, and I can kind of see them doing that if they want to follow the theme of the show and the books.
Where you're
never
following
on one character. You're never on one character, either the show or the books.
There's tons of characters, so that'd be really cool. And then in the final episode would be kind of when your characters come together
and die.
And yes, well, yeah.
Because that's Game of Thrones. Everybody dies.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a bit more excited for this one than I am for Borderlands, just because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. And I'm
Have you
also
read all the books that are out right now?
no, I haven't. I've not read the latest one.
Okay,
And that's
I'm
because I got
somewhere.
so obsessed with the show, I didn't actually want to spoil it for myself.
Oh, see, I love the show too, but I've been staying just ahead of it with the books.
Okay.
Like a new season, because the books, they're hard to just sit down and read through.
Yeah.
They're big. They're really, 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 really good.
But
But
apparently,
there's a lot going on. It hurts my head.
apparently the show has started to put in things like lately, like with Bran meeting spoilers, Bran meeting the guy in the tree or whatever that he met at the end of season 4. Forget who that
Yeah.
guy was. The Crow, basically.
Uh-huh.
Like that hasn't even happened in the book yet, apparently.
Yeah, well, because books 4 and 5, I think it's books 4 and 5 take place at the same time, but they're just like book 4, you're following certain characters, and then book 5 goes back to that beginning time again and follows different
I
characters.
see.
And
So season 4 then covers.
season 4 covers the first half of both of those books. So it's actually the first half of books 4 and 5 because, like I said, I've been trying to stay just ahead of it, and I'm like 3/4 of the way through book 4 or something like that, I think. And so there was a lot of stuff at the end of season 4 of the TV series where like certain characters, their storyline was ending, and I'm like, whoa, I'm way ahead of that. There's tons more that I know happens. And there were other characters where I was like, wait, what happens? I don't remember. I didn't read any of this. So some characters I'm ahead of where they are in the series, other characters I'm behind where they are in the series, and they are slowly making more and more changes away from the book,
Yeah.
which they have to. I mean, they consolidated a bunch of characters in the TV series.
Yeah.
Like, like in the book, that character is like 4 different people.
Well, maybe we could see that then in the game. Maybe we could see. I mean, obviously, I don't think Telltale's going to just make characters up that don't exist.
Yeah.
They might. I don't know. But
Well,
I
no,
can see
they
them.
could, but they'll be in real houses, and they'll be people that could exist. They won't contradict anything.
Yeah, that's definitely not what they're going to do. They're definitely not going to contradict anything, and I'd love to see cameos. Like, if we don't see Tyrion at one point or another, I would just be disappointed.
Please. Please, even if we just see him, like, run by or something.
Or just see Ned Stark's head rolling on the ground. Something, I don't know.
Oh.
But yes, this is another one I'm very excited for, and probably more excitement just because we see no screenshots, nothing. We don't know what it's even going to look like.
Yeah, we don't know anything.
But they said release 2014, back when that will most likely get delayed at this point since we're already in September and no screenshots. But if we're lucky,
I don't know.
we
Their
could
other
see it.
stuff tends to drop out of nowhere.
Yeah. So
I mean, like, they announced The Wolf Among Us, and then it was like, and here's the first episode.
yeah. So
Wait, what?
Hello.
So that one they might just be keeping more under wraps.
Yeah.
Because, Tales from the Borderland, it's less serious, it's more just fun. And so they're like, yeah, here it is, check it out, you're going to have a great
They
time.
may
And
not
this
wanna
one,
release spoilers for this one.
exactly, this one it's going to be like, here it is,
And
good luck.
we know also that executive producers from the TV show at HBO are involved in the making of this game. And they have made statements like, this is the game that Game of Thrones fans have been waiting for, this fits perfectly in our universe, da-da-da. So I think we're definitely going to have heavy story tie-ins with the movie and books, and that's, like we're saying, that's probably why we haven't seen it, because no spoilers.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for that game, and what we could talk about the future of Telltale for a little bit. Where do we see The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us going from here? Now that they're both concluded, taking a little break.
I mean, The Walking Dead, they can easily just keep going. At this point, I'm wondering where they will go with the main character. Are they just going to keep having us be Clementine from now on and see her grow up? Because if they do that, that takes away the whole knowing your character could die type of thing.
Well, I mean, still wasn't convinced that Clementine was gonna survive until I
Yeah.
finished the episode. So
But I'm saying if they come back with a season 3 with, and again, you're Clementine, and say she survives again, and they keep bringing her back, I mean, it would be really cool to kind of follow her growing up. Like in the next
Yeah.
game, let's have it be a couple years down the road, and now we have a teenager Clementine.
with a little child.
Yeah, with a little kid,
Yeah.
and then jump a couple years again and have an adult Clementine, and then that would be really cool to see Clementine grow up. But at the same time, you'd start feeling like Clementine is immortal because
Yeah.
everyone dies in this world. They don't live this long.
Yeah, I would like to see multiple options. I mean, because people are gonna be starting the season differently because of how different you could have ended season 2. I'd like to see something along the lines where Clementine could die or she couldn't. That would be interesting. So you end up maybe you're playing as someone else or maybe you're still Clementine.
Yeah,
And then that could just change the game so rapidly. I mean, that could be a lot of
that would get
development for
really
them.
hard to do. Yeah.
A lot to basically be making two different stories at that point. But I don't know. That'd be interesting. I'd like to see it be more different, like widely different.
Yeah, The Wolf Among Us is a little more interesting because with this one they did go with the main characters in the comics. They didn't create a side thing, and it is a prequel to the comics.
So yeah, and that almost limits it because there's things you just can't do, people you can't kill off because they're in the comic books.
Exactly. There's characters you can't kill off. There's characters you can't introduce because they have to be introduced later on in the comics. Like, that one is much more limited in where they can go. I'd love to see more, but they might not even be able to just because of the limitations.
Yeah, so season 2 for The Wolf Among Us may be really interesting.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. I mean, when do you think we'll see? Obviously, The Walking Dead will be coming later just because it ended later. When do you think we could possibly see The Wolf Among Us season 2?
Well, they're definitely focused on Tales from the Borderlands and Game of Thrones right now. I'd say the soonest we'd see an announcement would be late spring, early summer next year. Because if you see, like...
I really don't think TellTale's going to have 4 games going at the same time. I really can't see them doing that. There's a
And
lot of work.
each game tends to be about 6 months from first episode to finishing the season. So, if Tales of the Borderland comes out in the next month or so, which it honestly, I'm expecting that they'll be like, oh, Tales comes out next week. That's what they do.
Yeah.
I just expect any week now that they'll say it's coming out within the next week or two.
Yeah.
And then I'd say probably if they're going to stagger it like they did with Wolf Among Us and Walking Dead, then about a month after that first episode, we're probably going to hear some concrete details on Game of Thrones. And we'll have those two coming out staggered. And that'll take up about 6 months or so. So until about, late spring, early summer next year.
Interesting.
And then we'll start hearing details on either other franchises or Season 2 Wolf Among Us, Season 3 Walking Dead.
Yep. So what about the possibility of other franchises? So now they have 4 that they're working on. Can you see them adding another IP?
I'd love if they do. I'm also interested to see what if they did something of their own.
Just their own story.
Yeah,
everywhere.
what if they created their own IP, a new IP?
That would-
Or, because at this point they could, there's so many directions they could do. They could, it would be awesome if they hooked up with Marvel
Yeah.
and
that would be awesome.
and make things that exist within either the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Marvel Comic Universe. Like, pick one and stick to it
Yeah.
and exist alongside those other ongoing
Oh,
stories.
that'd be fantastic, Marvel. Or,
Um,
I've heard theories, most likely not happening, but I have heard theories that TellTale, because they worked with LucasArts in the past, TellTale could make a Star Wars game.
That would be amazing.
It would be. It would be so cool.
And, if they were going to work with Marvel, guess what? Marvel and Star Wars are both owned by Disney.
Yep. So hey, there's
So
2 franchises you could
There's
be.
2 for 1. If they work out something with Disney, that's a 2 for 1 of huge franchises. and I think they've proven themselves that they can take big name franchises and do really well with it.
I personally would like to see Warcraft.
Yeah, well, Warcraft
like
would
a
be
story,
amazing.
like
Or StarCraft, or Diablo.
Yeah, yeah.
Any of Blizzard's stuff.
Any
Let's
of
see them
Blizzard's
hook up
stuff.
with... Because at this point, they've hooked up with comic books with Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, another game company with Gearbox and Borderlands,
now HBO,
and now HBO and a book with Game of Thrones.
So they
they've
are obviously
hooked up-
willing to go any direction with.
Yeah, there's
people they're
so
teaming
many, so many people they could hook up with. At one point, they were
up. They are
working
the
on
sluts of the game industry.
and they're good ones though, high quality, expensive.
Yes, you pay for these sluts, and they give you what you want. Okay.
But they could bring back old franchises like they were gonna do with King's Quest at one point, which got canceled last year.
Yeah.
But they could bring back stuff like that. What if they hooked up with other? What if they made a Mass Effect? What if they hooked up with BioWare? What if they made a Mass Effect side story? What if you were following one of the what are the Solarian Special Forces groups called? STG or something like that? The Solarian Tactics Group or
a
whatever.
Star Trek game.
Yeah,
they
right?
really could go anywhere. So I mean,
They could do
we could really just list off our
anything.
favorite TV shows, and Telltale could probably make a game about it.
Yeah.
But
Let's see, if we were going to stick with... Because, Walking Dead and Game of Thrones are definitely darker, more serious. Wolf Among Us is even. So if we're going to stick with things that fit in that vein, what would be some good choices if they're going to stick with that more mature, darker, where they can do some, really in-depth storytelling?
I still think, like we said, Marvel, they still could fit that in there, because Marvel, in turn, has been taking kind of aside from Guardians of the Galaxy, have been taking a darker kind of approach, especially from what I've heard about Avengers 2. So that could definitely work. Or Warcraft, that's obviously a very war-driven universe that they could go into. Or Diablo. Diablo would be really interesting.
Diablo would be cool. I'm really excited for Game of Thrones because it's going to be a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And so I really want to see that.
I'm almost wanting to see a different style of gameplay from them, but at the same time, I like how they do it.
They're so good at what they do.
Yeah.
Just yeah, I can't.
I just kind of want more, like, for Game of Thrones, I just want to be able to actually swing the sword instead of mash A to swing the sword, you know what I mean? But we'll see when we get there.
Yeah. Or, like, I mean, there's so many things they could do. Like I said, just list off all of our favorite things, and
Yeah.
I'd like to see them do that. I'd love to see them do a Ninja Turtles thing. Be amazing. Because the comics of Ninja Turtles are actually rather dark.
Yeah.
Well, the non-Archie comics.
Yeah. Then that would be interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. But I'm really excited to see where they go. And the second that you can pre-order and pay for Tales from Borderlands and Game of Thrones, I will be.
Yep, immediately.
The second it goes up, I'm like, and bought that season.
Maybe they
Now
should
I have
do
to
like
wait.
a sitcom, like How I Met Your Mother or Seinfeld or something like that.
A funny... Well, Tales from the Borderlands is probably going to be like that, honestly.
Yeah. It would just be interesting if they totally went sitcom on you, and like there was no like action or drama. It was just comedy, goofy
Which
things,
joke
like,
do you want to tell?
Yeah.
Do you want to be sarcastic? Do you want to be observational? What type of humor are you going for here?
Or do you suddenly want to pull a romantic gesture out of your back pocket and make the audience
Aww. And the whole point is getting different feedback from the live studio audience.
Yes, and that's the goal. You have like
Actually, that would be amazing. I really want to see this
you
now.
have a sidebar.
TellTale,
that you just-
do it.
TellTale. We know you watch our show just like Blizzard does. Well, I think that about wraps up this show.
Yeah.
Everyone, thanks for watching. We'll get this on YouTube as soon as we can. And next week, of course, we have kind of a big game coming out next Tuesday. If anyone's ever heard of Destiny, stay tuned for Epic Geeks because we will be covering that here as well as every future TellTale game that comes out and every other game that comes out this fall because there sure is a lot of them.
Yes, I think we should make a standing TellTale show where we talk about each episode of each of their games,
Yep,
like the day after it comes out.
Most likely do that starting with Tales from the Borderlands.
Yes,
So-
let's do it.
Stay tuned to Epic Geeks for more on this plus many other games. Goodbye.